Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to We Have the Power podcast with your host, Haywire from Changing Methods. I want to welcome you all today to our very first reaction video. I know I may be a little late, but I'm just coming across the Kamala Harris interview on Fox News, and it was pretty interesting. So I want to do a reaction video and see what you guys think. And with no further ado, let's dig in.
Madam Vice President, thank you for the time.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brett.
You know, voters tell pollsters all over the country and here in Pennsylvania that immigration is one of the key issues that they're looking at this election, and specifically the influx of illegal immigrants from more than 150 countries.
That's a fact.
How many illegal immigrants would you estimate your administration has released into the country over the last 3.5 years?
Well, I'm glad you raised the issue of immigration because I agree with you. It is a topic of discussion that people want to rightly have. And you know what I'm going to talk about.
Yeah, but
right
do you,
now,
just a number. Do you think it's 1 million, 3 million?
See, right there, when a politician gets asked a question, they like to try to be, I guess, formal, or like it's almost like they give their opinion on the question. Then they state the obvious. They kind of wing away from directly answering the question.
Brett, let's just get to the point. Okay, the point is that we have a broken immigration system that needs to be repaired.
So your Homeland Security Secretary said that 85% of apprehensions.
I'm not finished. We have
it's a
an
rough
immigration
estimate of 6 million people have been released into the country. And let me just finish. I'll get to the question. I promise you.
I was beginning to answer.
See how all of a sudden it became an issue of I'm answering the question. I'm trying to get to answer your question. And the thing is, that's almost like a diversion to me in that scenario. Sometimes when you're talking to somebody and you already know they have a history of talking or giving a word salad or winging away from the direct question, you kind of start to find yourself trying to speak and keep them on the subject. And I think that's kind of what happened there, in my opinion.
And when you came into office, your administration immediately reversed a number of Trump border policies. Most significantly, the policy that required illegal immigrants to be detained through deportation, either in the U.S. or in Mexico. And you switched that policy. They were released from custody awaiting trial. So instead, included in those were a large number of single men, adult men, who went on to commit heinous crimes. So, looking back, do you regret the decision to terminate Remain in Mexico at the beginning of your administration?
Okay, so before she answers that question, I was hoping that she definitely would not say, well, you know, whether they were here or not, crime happens all over, because I've a couple of times be made that when you say if that person was never allowed to be in that scenario at all, which we're talking about the person who did the attack, the person who got attacked would have not been unalived or injured in the situation. And so I was just saying to myself, please do not say that the fact that that person could have been gone, or shall I say not here in the first place, or in the scenario in the first place, that counteracts or try to use to say, well, crime happens all the time and people get unalived. I mean, I'm just saying, I've heard that scenario used before.
At the beginning of our administration, within practically hours of taking the oath, the first bill that we offered Congress, before we worked on infrastructure, before the Inflation Reduction Act, before the CHIPS and Science Act, before the bipartisan Safer Communities Act, the first bill, practically within hours of taking the oath, was a bill to fix our immigration system.
Yes, ma'am. It was called
And-
the U.S. Citizenship Act of 2021.
Exactly.
It was essentially a pathway to
may I
citizenship for
please
the
finish?
Yes,
May
ma'am.
I finish responding,
But
please?
here- but this-
you have to let me finish.
You had the
please.
White House and the House and the Senate,
I'm
and they
in the
didn't
middle
bring up
of
that bill.
responding to the point you're.
You see how she's maximizing the fact that she wants to, I don't know if it's to say, I really want to finish my, she probably looks at it as an explanation, but sometimes in conversation that can be looked at, I really want to tell my excuse. I really want to give an excuse for what you're asking me. Take ownership of what you're asking me. And I see she's trying to maximize the fact that she isn't getting a chance to put out rather what she has rehearsed. And this is any politician, so don't look at this like I'm taking sides on anything like that before I start getting the attacks. I'm just saying. I see that a lot in conversation when a person has already formulated in their mind an excuse or an explanation for the question rather than taking ownership and just answering the question straight up.
You're raising.
Okay.
And I'd like to finish.
Yes, ma'am.
We recognized from day one that to the point of this being your first question, it is a priority for us as a nation and for the American people. And our focus has been on fixing a problem. And from day one, then, we have done a number of things, including to address our asylum system and put more resources, getting more judges, what we needed to do to tighten up penalties and increase penalties for illegal crossings, what we needed to do to deal with points of entry between border entry points. That's the work we did, and we worked on supporting what was a bipartisan effort, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Congress.
Now, I think she really did a good job in executing her answer. She had it all well communicated. She had it all in her mind. She knew exactly how she wanted to answer that question. And I just stopped there to let that go back to the point I just made about already having the answer or the excuse or the explanation already in mind. So when you get faced with that question at go time, you feel like it's important for you to make that statement be known.
To actually strengthen the border. That border bill would have put 1,500 more border agents at the border, which is why I believe the Border Patrol agents supported the bill. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States, which is a scourge affecting people of every background, every geographic location in our country, killing people. It would have allowed us to put more resources into prosecuting transnational criminal organizations, which I have done as the Attorney General, former Attorney General of a border state.
Madam Vice President, a couple of things.
Prosecuted trafficking of drugs, guns, and human beings. And Donald Trump, but let me just...
See, now, there she goes. Now she's overselling herself. She's trying to oversell herself to make a point about, even though my actions now are reflecting it, the fact is, I have a history of working in a position, and so I've done actions when I was doing that position. That's that fact that she presented is facts. However, does that necessarily apply to your actions that you're exhibiting in the current position that you're holding?
Six Democrats voted against that bill.
Learned about that bill and told them to kill it because he preferred to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And in this election, this is rightly a discussion that the American people want to have. And what they want are solutions, and they want a president of the United States who's not playing political games with the issue,
I hear you,
but actually is focused on fixing it.
I wonder how many times these questions are going to be blamed on someone else instead of just answering the question. Like people who talk and when they're being confronted with a fact, it's almost like they always need something or someone. If you're in a position where you're asked a question, when you or even walk something back, apologize, whatever the case may be, when your response to the question that you're asked causes you to not take ownership, but find something to blame it on, find something to, like an excuse or a reason behind your actions, I really don't feel like that's taking ownership of it, because what you're saying is, I'm innocent because this reason, that reason, this reason, instead of just saying, and a lot of people like to save face, especially when they're on camera. I get it. I'll own it. I apologize. You got me. Stuff. I'm not saying that I need people to say things the way I feel like they should say it. I'm just bringing up that issue that people have in the world, or hell, I'll just say in America, especially when it comes to politicians.
Democrats voted against that bill. It would have allowed 1.8 million illegal immigrants into the country a year. A lot of conservatives had a problem with it. These are the 6 Democrats. But more importantly, back to the original premise, Jocelyn Nungari, Rachel Morin, Laken Riley, they are young women who were brutally assaulted and killed by some of the men who were released at the beginning of the administration, well before.
That's a big deal. And can you imagine that the young girls that he mentioned are just a few? What about the young men? What about our society as a whole? There's a lot of crimes that go unreported. And I don't mean by the police stations, I mean to the media. Families that want their story to be told, and they're the ones who agree or allow their story to be put on mainstream media. There's also times when people are ashamed or afraid or just more recluse about their life and feel a little more intimate. And I'm not saying that they care more than the other ones, but I'm just saying some of those people are more sensitive to their story being repeated over and over. Some of those individuals don't allow their story to be put on mainstream media platforms. They keep it unmedia related. So I'm just saying, I'm in my way. I am in my own way maximizing the fact that there are way more individuals that were reported on this platform, on this news platform. It's way more victims out there than that.
A negotiated bipartisan bill. Former President Clinton actually referred to Laken Riley Sunday campaigning for you in Georgia, saying if those men had been properly vetted, Laken Riley probably would not have been killed. So if it wouldn't have happened, this is well before any negotiation. This is well before Donald Trump got involved in the politics. This is a specific policy decision by your administration to release these men into the country. So what I'm saying to you, do you owe
Brett,
those families an apology?
Let me just say, first of all.
See, now here we go. We're going to try to deflect. He was pretty direct. I feel that I sense that she just didn't like what was being said. And so now let's hear her response.
Tragic cases. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the victims have experienced.
I'm not saying that a person lacks compassion, but I'm just saying that we need see when people are putting emphasis on a feeling and not necessarily putting emphasis on the fact. So now she can put her feelings about the situation to minimize the actions or the facts that's being relayed to her.
Those are tragic cases. There's no question about that. There's no question about that. And I can't imagine the pain that the families of those victims have experienced for a loss that should not have occurred. So that is true. It is also true that if a border security had actually been passed 9 months ago, it would be 9 months that we would have had more border agents at the border, more support for the folks who are working around the clock trying to hold it all together.
Madam Vice.
You know, the only problem is when it's something like this, we can put emphasis on the time it could have took or the length of the time lapse. However, when it's on other issues, like the outward manifestation of who we are, they often stand on their platforms and they make those primary and they make it seem like they can do it instantly. You know, like they'll use terms like on day one, or, you know, if I will fight it and get it overturned and I will sign a bill and I'll take executive action. They use stuff like that. And it's just weird to me that when we have a situation like this, why haven't they, you know, touted those same phrases that they use for those other narratives painting on the campaign trail?
To ensure that no future harm would occur. And this election in 20 days will determine whether we have a president of the United States who actually cares more about fixing a problem, even if it is not to their political advantage in an election, because there was a solution, Brett.
Madam Vice President, it was a policy decision in the early part of your administration. I will let one of the mothers talk about it. Take a listen.
Uh-oh, now we're about to see some footage of one of the victim's parents. And let's see how the people who are not elite, let's see how the people in our inner cities, in our country that are not sitting up in the lifestyles that these politicians are sitting in, and the media people who are being paid to spread propaganda. Let's see how one of us who are out here every day living our lives, let's see what they have to say.
Because of the Biden-Harris administration open border policies catch and release, they were enrolled in the Alternatives to Detention program. This meant that they were released into the United States. It was not even a full 3 weeks later that they would take my daughter, Jocelyn Nungare's life. I believe the Biden-Harris administration open border policies are responsible for the death of my daughter.
That's the early days. So do you owe them an apology is what I'm saying.
I will tell you that I am so sorry for her loss. I'm so sorry for her loss. Sincerely.
I may be overthinking it, but I feel like sometimes body language tells a lot. So when he said, do you owe her an apology? She was saying that she's sorry for her loss, but she was shaking her head no. So she was saying, I'm sorry for her loss, but I'm not agreeing that I owe her an apology. And so when she did not, she was saying, I'm agreeing with the fact that I feel bad for her loss. And it's weird to me how somebody that had the parent of a victim or the loved one of a victim, how is it that their feelings aren't maximized in our society? You know, that just felt kind of like when the other political candidate had a situation while he was in office, and I'm talking about in our inner city here in Kansas City. He left there, and I'm not saying right then that day, but he did come to Kansas City and grieve with the victim's loved ones. And fact check me and leave it in the comments if I'm wrong, because I haven't really followed it too much. This is just a reaction video that I'm doing about the interview, but I could have sworn I've heard a lot of times watching the news when I do about how there are loved ones of victims that have been speaking out on they feel neglected by our government officials on the high levels like that when it comes down to coming to grieve with them or coming to talk to them and let them share their feelings and stories to them overall. I just feel like I hear more people speaking out against those politicians, saying that when we were facing something, and sometimes even years later after the incident, that they still haven't heard back from the government officials on giving time, to either give their story or to even empathize with them for their loss.
But let's talk about what is happening right now. An individual who does not want to participate in solutions.
Now, I know we didn't just shift from caring about and talking about and the chance to maximize the fact that we are grieving and that something needs to be done about a situation that is causing the person that's speaking themselves to say that they're grieving over a situation where someone was attacked or unalived in a situation. I know we're not finna try to redirect from that and start blaming again, because it seemed like she's getting ready to start talking about Donald made that side remark about, well, that's cool. Well, she didn't say that's cool, but she was like, I understand that. But now let's talk about Donald Trump.
But let's talk about what is happening right now with an individual who does not want to participate in solutions. Let's talk about that as well.
But do you want to answer
in all fairness, I told you, I feel awful for what she and her family have experienced.
During that time, you said repeatedly that the border was secure. When in your mind did it start becoming a crisis?
I think we've had a broken immigration system transcending, by the way, Donald Trump's administration even before. Let's all be honest about that. I have no pride in saying that this is a perfect immigration system. I've been clear, I think we all are, that it needs to be fixed. We need more. I was just down at the border talking with border agents, and they will tell you, and I'm sure you probably, I know you investigate and you are a serious journalist.
So now we're stating the obvious to prove a point. That's all she just did was stated the obvious. Like, the things that she's saying is almost like that's common, that's a fact. But that's still, to me, not necessarily taking ownership or answering the question in a productive way.
They will tell you, we need more judges. We need to process those cases faster. We need the support for those cases that should be prosecuted. They need more resources, and Congress ultimately is the only place that's going to get fixed, Brett. Well, that's how this system works.
That's the premise of this question. There were 90-plus executive orders that were rescinded in the first days.
See, that's what I'm saying. In a conversation, you almost have to, unfortunately, it's almost like not even an interview. It's almost like a debate. You see what I'm saying? He actually had to remind her that that was the premise of the question.
Many of those were Trump border policies. I'm not going to stay here because there's other things to talk about, but you frequently talk to the Border Patrol Union for support of that bipartisan bill, and they did. They supported it. But they also just endorsed Donald Trump and said, you've been, quote, a failure with border security.
Woo-wee! He just destroyed her. And I know she feels destroyed because she's trying to save face just like any other politician would have to try to save face when they are hit with the truth and it makes them uncomfortable, or that was something that they didn't want to hear. So let's see her reaction to hearing that.
Why do you think they said that?
I think they're frustrated, and I get it. They want support. They want support, and that's what that border security bill would have done. These guys down at the border, these men and women, they're working hard. They're working around the clock. I get it.
These people saying that you're failed them, and you're saying I get it. Okay, so if you're saying you get it, what's being done about it? I mean, I don't think the questions that he is asking you is necessarily focusing on the now. I think it's overall, not just talking about right now, this is how they feel.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
Well, see, that's the kind of stuff right there that makes me believe that she didn't choose him. Like he was given to her. Like we're following a script, and this character was written into your story. This isn't somebody that you handpicked. But then again, I guess I can't say that because the way she felt about Joe Biden when he was running for president the first time, that she became his vice president too. But then again, we all know the premise behind her being selected as vice president.
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
So decriminalizing border crossings, like you said in 2019.
I do not believe in decriminalizing border crossings, and I've not done that as vice president. I will not do that as president.
He just said that you said that before. So I don't think you rested that. I think you just jumped on that to say, well, I haven't been doing it, have I? But why didn't you say, well, that was in the past, just like you walked it back earlier when you said, well, that was 5 years ago. You know, you said, well, I'm not doing it now. I haven't been doing it. Oh, okay, but when you say, for example, you get your promotion, will you do it then? You may not be doing it right now as the second in command, but that doesn't eradicate the fact that you may do it when you become first in.
So these are evolutions that you've had.
But let's be very clear. I'm the only person who's running for president who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations from the Senate.
Now, if she's saying she's the only one running who has done that, that's only because no one else is on the platform running for that position with that same career history. And because if that's the case, every candidate should be able to brag about and say, well, I'm the only shoemaker or I'm the only toy store owner to be running. I mean, again, that's kind of stating the obvious to me. And now she's going into selling herself again to overshadow the question at hand.
Loa cartel, to the Guadalajara cartel, to people who have trafficked in guns, drugs, and human beings. I have spent a significant part of my career going after people who present a threat to the safety of the American people and cross our border with the intent of doing us harm and cross our border illegally. And I will do that work as vice president. I take that work quite seriously.
This is a time when voters, especially here in Pennsylvania, are inundated with commercials and ads. They just want it to stop because it's every commercial. But many of them add noise, but a few of them seem to break through. This particular one from the Trump campaign has gotten a lot of attention.
Now we finna look at a promo from Donald Trump about Kamala. And this looked like it's being played on CNN. Let's see it.
Kamala supports taxpayer-funded sex changes for prisoners.
Surgery.
For prisoners.
For prisoners. Every transgender inmate in the prison system would have access.
So are you still in support of using taxpayer dollars to help prison inmates or detained illegal aliens to transition to another gender?
I will follow the law. And it's a law that Donald Trump actually followed.
So basically, from the answer she just gave, that should mean no. Because I don't think there's a state law that us taxpayers should have to pay for someone's sexual transfiguration operation. I don't think that would fall under something that would be an emergency procedure that would warrant a matter of life and death. I mean, maybe in their feelings or in their mind, but not in the actual reality that we live in.
You're probably familiar with, now it's a public report, that under Donald Trump's administration, these surgeries were available on a medical necessity basis.
So first, she's bringing up Donald Trump to do a comparison. And then she's also hitting the fact that you're saying surgery to a person who is transgender or to a person in prison, which that should be the overall picture that we're seeing, is that we're talking about an inmate, period. That when they have a surgery that we're paying for, there are small surgeries like to stop them from bleeding. I mean, all of those things that will qualify as an emergency surgery is all across the platform. However, the fact that the person wants to make a choice to change their outward manifestation of themselves, I don't agree that should be paid for by taxpayers, because that's almost like we're being forced to pay for it. Yes, we want to love. Yes, we want to love unconditionally. Yes, there's forgiveness. However, in my human flesh, it's okay for me to be honest and say, in some ways, I kind of have a problem with that.
To people in the federal prison system. And I think, frankly, that ad from the Trump campaign is a little bit of like throwing, stones when you're living in a glass house.
The Trump aides say that he never advocated for that prison policy and no gender transition surgeries
you know what? You got to take responsible for what happened in your administration.
Yeah, no surgeries happened in his presidency.
It's in black and white.
Would you still advocate for using taxpayer dollars for gender reassignment?
You see how she's cutting him off? Like, he's talking and she's talking over him. And she's saying stuff like, well, that's too bad. You got to take ownership of what happens under your administration. But that's hypocritical to me, because when they're asking you or your administration questions, y'all like to play the game or make reasons or excuses instead of just straight up taking ownership. So if you are not equipped with the ability to do that, it's amazing to me how you're able to perpetuate this onto your opponents or anyone else.
I will follow the law, just as I think Donald Trump would say he did.
You would have a say as president.
Like I said, I think he spent $20 million on those ads, trying to create.
Now we're talking about how much money he spent on the ad. You see what I'm saying? Now you're getting off the subject by trying to maximize something that should be irrelevant to what the question was and your response to.
A sense of fear in the voters because he actually has no plan in this election that is about focusing on the needs of the American people.
Any politician that makes those ads, not to present all of them, but a lot of them are designed to in some way put fear in the hearts of the American people before it's voting time. I don't understand how on this major platform you're trying to say that only the other side does stuff like that. Like, even when it was Joe Biden, I remember several times we heard him say divisive things. We've heard people on both sides say divisive things. But the problem is, on one side, they're not condemning the other side for saying what they want to say. But on the other side, they say negative things and they put fear in the hearts of people and they demonize and spread. And then they turn around and exploit the other side for doing that exact same thing. And sometimes even less than that.
Whereas, at $20 million on that ad, on an issue that, as it relates to the biggest issues that affect the American people, it's really quite remote. And again, his policy was no different. Look at where we are, though. On plans for the American people, I'm offering a plan to deal with affordable housing. I'm offering a plan to deal with what we need to do to strengthen small businesses, which are the backbone of America.
He's asking her to move on because he can already see that they're talking in circles now. Like, to entertain what she's saying is only going to cause them to either talk in circles or not bring progress or a resolution to the question that was asked.
America's economy. I am offering a plan that is about taking care of young parents and giving them the support they need. My plans for the economy will strengthen the economy, as have been reviewed by 16 Nobel laureates, Goldman Sachs.
Her plan to strengthen the economy. I think I've heard a few, but the major platform running on was something to the extent of exploiting big corporations for price gouging us, and she was going to put an end to some type of price gouging or something like that.
Moody's and recently the Wall Street Journal, which have all studied our plans and have indicated my plans for our economy would strengthen our economy, his would make them weaker, would ignite inflation and invite a recession by the middle of next year. Those are the facts.
Why do you think more people say they trust him on the economy than they trust you?
Well,
I think that when you look at an analysis of our plans for what we would do as President of the United States, it has been clear to those who study and understand how economic policy works that moving forward, because I do believe the American people are ready to turn the page on the divisiveness and the type of rhetoric that has come out of Donald Trump.
So we went from people trusting him on economic, they trust him more. And then you said people are ready to turn the page because they're tired of hearing his rhetoric. People listening right now, be honest with yourself. Ask yourself, has her administration, have they not been participating in divisive rhetoric? And the fact that you say turn the page, if you say turn the page while you're trying to sound so philosophical or deep by saying they want to turn the page, if we're turning the page, we're turning the page from what we're currently reading or currently witnessing or currently is. If we're turning the page, that is not saying we're turning the page from something that happened 4 years ago. Because if you're saying turning the page by saying they're tired of hearing spew rhetoric, then you're also convicting yourself because you spread rhetoric, spew rhetoric on your platform every time you take it. I mean, there's no difference. So you can't fight your enemy by becoming just like your enemy.
They're ready to chart a new way forward, and they want a president who has a plan for the future and a plan that is sound and will strengthen our country. My plan for the economy does exactly that. His plan would be, again, to give tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations in our country and blow up our deficit.
It's interesting you said turn the page, Madam Vice President. You were asked on 2 different shows last week what, if anything, you would do differently than President Biden. Here's what you said.
Would you have done something differently than President Biden during the past 4 years?
There is not a thing that comes to mind in terms of, and I've been a part of most of the decisions that have had impact.
Under a Harris administration, what would the major changes be, and what would stay the same?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'm obviously not Joe Biden.
I know.
And so that would be one change in terms of, but also I think it's important to say with, 28 days to go, I'm not Donald Trump.
So, stuff like that right there. If you're turning the page, you're turning it from what's currently happening. The fact that you're in office and you already admitting that you were a part of every impactful decision that was made, then if we're turning the page, doesn't that mean that if we're desiring to turn the page, that we're wanting to turn it from you?
So, you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently.
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency.
So, was that a diss? Like, if you're riding with him right now and all this is going on, you make it seem like you have no voice in the decisions that was made. However, you just were shown that you have said, and I'm sure you're aware, that you said that you were a part of every impactful decision that was made. So if the vice president becomes president, how is that not running ideas or procedures or orders and things of that nature?
So, you're not Joe Biden, you're not Donald Trump, but nothing comes to mind that you would do differently?
Let me be very clear. My presidency will not be a continuation of Joe Biden's presidency. And like every new president that comes into office, I will bring my life experiences, my professional experiences, and fresh and new ideas. I represent a new generation of leadership. I, for example, am someone who has not spent the majority of my career in Washington, D.C. I invite ideas, whether it be from the Republicans who are supporting me, who were just on stage with me.
So isn't that basically the same thing that Mr. Orange Man Bad, isn't that the same thing that he was saying, and they were condemning him because they felt like he didn't spend enough time in Washington, D.C. to have it to be in leadership?
Minutes ago, and the business sector and others who can contribute to the decisions that I make about, for example, my plan for increasing the supply of housing in America and bringing down the cost of housing, addressing the issue of small businesses, which is about working with the private sector to bring more capital and access to capital to our small business leaders, including my plan for a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and for small businesses, extending the tax deduction from $5,000 to $50,000.
We've heard a lot about those plans in recent days. Your campaign slogan is a new way forward, and it's time to turn the page. You've been vice president for 3.5 years. So what are you turning the page from?
Whoa! So now that we're confronted with a question that is truth, let's see her reaction to being told something that she wasn't trying to hear.
Well, first of all, turning the page from the last decade in which we've been burdened with the kind of rhetoric coming from Donald Trump.
If she starts that burden slogan, I am going to, and I mean eat with salt, pepper, and ranch, my laptop.
That has been designed and implemented to divide our country and have Americans literally point fingers at each other. Rhetoric.
Okay, that's a flat out lie. The politicians that are in power right now, currently, are definitely the ones who are spreading propaganda to Americans that make them point the finger and be divisive and angry at one another. That is definitely the side of the aisle that she's on. And this is coming from someone who uses his God-given talents of sight and the capability of understanding what's being told, like being able to comprehend what's being said to me. I definitely hear regularly people who are in that administration, and a lot of, not all, but a lot of their followers and supporters are definitely the ones running off of that steamboat of conditioning people to feel like their feelings supersede logic and fact, making people feel like the color of their skin should make them feel more important than or more deserving than, telling people the fact that their history has something to make them believe that there has been no progression due to the color of their skin. People being conditioned to believe that anything that is not considered a social in a person is causing them to feel victimized, and they feel like they have the right to go around and be ready to be on the offense toward people who disagree, who don't like, or they don't accept the lifestyle or the behavior patterns that they're being shown from people who are being conditioned to set up and constantly make the outward manifestation of themselves or their opinion that is not necessarily a fact overshadow and make everybody bow down to it. They absolutely strip the power of the freedom of speech, the fact that we all have our own opinion and idea, and they force society to bow down to their idea.
And an approach to leadership that suggests that the strength of a leader is based on who you beat down instead of what we all know. The strength of leadership is based on who you lift up.
The strength of leadership is not who you beat down. Yet and still, the people on their administration definitely tries to beat down their opponent constantly. And I mean constantly. And you hear it constantly.
The strength of an American president, which is one who understands that the vast majority of us have more in common than what separates us.
Madam Vice President, more than 70% of people
that is
tell
about turning the
pollsters-
page on rhetoric that people are frankly exhausted of, Brett.
More than 70% of people.
So now you're going to maximize that people are more concerned with what opponent is saying, and we are not at all concerned about the actions and the things that our current leaders in administration is saying.
tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is...
She's so exhausted. She's running out of ammunition. And he's still coming to her with logic and facts. Now, she's been presented with a fact, and you can see in her body language that she definitely did not either see that coming, or she wasn't prepared for that, or she's just tired of having to defend herself and make excuses and give explanations rather than take accountability for the things that are being said. She's almost, and it might even be tired of holding back. She's probably ready to lash out. And I don't mean in a totally unprofessional way, but you probably will begin to see her language change in the interview process.
What they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
See that? You see that? See that? She had nothing. This will definitely do when they are playing on people's intelligence, right? Like he was very direct, and he even brought receipts. And she had nothing. Instead of her taking accountability, instead of her being able to accept that fact, she fires back with, well, my opponent has been running. What does the fact that your opponent that is running, that has the right to run, anyone who is qualified or has held the position or worked their way up to be able to run for that, just like everybody else that's ran for it in life, they all have the right to run for that position. So what, I just don't understand what that response was. It made her look, to me, it made her look like she's definitely all about playing the blame game instead of accepting facts.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
I love him for that. See, that's what I mean. You have to be bold, and you have to stand on truth. She tried to manipulate tried to manipulate the viewers and make us believe that he's just playing a role. She knows behind the scenes the truth, or he really knows the truth. He's just doing what a reporter does. And actually, no, I don't. What do you mean? Tell us, what do you mean? Because I don't know what you mean.
You've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
But you've been the person holding the office.
Come on.
Madam
You
Vice
and I
President.
both know what I'm talking about. You and I both know what I'm talking about.
I actually don't. What are you talking about?
What I'm talking about is that over the last decade,
But
people
you're the
have
lever of
become.
power.
But listen, over the last decade, it is clear to me, and certainly the Republicans who are on stage with me.
If you say in the last decade, don't we start counting back from right now? So if she says within the last decade, something's been wrong, her administration has been part of that decade. And her opponent was only in office for 4 years. So that means it started back in the, and I mean only for the sake of the narrative that she put, that problem is the administration that was before the last one and went on and is still alive in the administration of the current.
The former chief of staff to the president, Donald Trump, former defense secretaries, national security advisor, and his vice president. One, that he is unfit to serve, that he is unstable, that he is dangerous.
What is you trying to maximize those issues or those concerns you have? What does that have to do with the fact that was presented to you? I see this a lot in people. They always try to flip the script and say, even though you're asking me, or even though at this moment I am the one who is sitting here to be in a place where I need to be held accountable, or hold myself accountable, actually, that the person answering the question, rather sit there and start blabbing on about ways that the other person went wrong or was wrong, to overshadow the fact that we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about you right now. There's going to be a time when we can talk about where the other person went wrong. But in the flow of conversation, the fact is right now we're talking about you. And we don't need you to start pointing the fingers at the other person, trying to maximize their flaw, to condition people to be reminded that we're supposed to be upset about that. We should really be more upset about that than to be sitting here making me confess or be held accountable or hold myself accountable for my actions or behaviors.
And that people are exhausted with someone who professes to be a leader who spends full time demeaning and engaging in personal grievances, and it being about him instead of the American people. People are tired of that.
If that's the case, why is half the country supporting him? Why is he beating you in a lot of swing states?
Uh-oh. That is the realest and the most logical question that anyone should be asking, even asking themselves. If this person is all messed up, like you sitting here saying that they are, why is there so many people standing behind him? And it's not necessarily numbers as far as popularity. It's about believing in the person. Why is so many people believing in him if he is all these things that you're claiming that he is right now?
It's why, if he's as bad as you say, that half of this country is now supporting this person who could be the 47th president of the United States. Why is that happening?
This is an election for president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy.
What? See, now we going back on, to me, that was a play on feelings. This is the president of the United States. It's not supposed to be easy. We didn't ask you if it was hard. We didn't ask you if a person should feel that it's easy. We're asking you directly a question. And the question was, if this person is as illogical as you sitting here trying to make them be on this platform in front of all these viewers, why do so many people believe in him?
I know, but
it's not supposed to be. It is not supposed to be a cakewalk for anyone.
So are they misguided, the 50%?
Listen,
are they stupid? What is it?
I would never say that about the American people. What else do we know about this population, 18 through 24? They are stupid. That is why we put them in dormitories. And they have a resident assistant. They make really bad decisions.
Now, more than once, I've heard this woman and other people on that administration literally call the people who are following their political opponent stupid, amongst other names. You know, but for him to say, are they misguided, and or what? I mean, that's being as politically correct as you can, because it's other names and very negative actions taken toward people who follow the political opponent. I'm not saying that it's not bad apples in that bunch on the other side that do the same thing. However, in my experience, walking through life, listening to people, looking at different platforms, watching different media news outlets, not just sticking to one solely, I definitely hear more often than not her administration or their administration that she's on definitely do more bashing and negative talk and talking down to trying to bully someone into bowing down to an ideology, that's definitely more perpetuated from the current administration.
Well, and in fact, if you listen to Donald Trump, if you watch any of his rallies, he's the one who tends to demean and belittle and diminish.
She's using these words. Those are buzzwords. Demean, belittle, demean, belittle. They doing the same thing. How is it not that when you're doing it? Oh, that's right. Let me guess. You'll be able to make an excuse or give an explanation to why you were acting illogical. So that way you don't have to hold accountability for what you did. You have a reason. You have some sort of excuse if you were asked, why are you doing it?
The American people, he's the one who talks about an enemy within, an enemy within, talking about the American people, suggesting he would turn the American military on the American people.
That is a narrative. Definitely a narrative. And also, that is something that is definitely preached from both sides of the aisle, talking about the American people being an enemy for not agreeing with them. And forgive me if I'm wrong, but I think that even originated on her side of the aisle, as far as looking at both sides of the street. And if we want to compare and contrast, that's definitely her side of the aisle or her administration that she's a part of that do a lot of that she's perpetuating on this platform right now.
We asked that question to the former president today. Horace Faulkner had a town hall, and this is how he responded.
I heard about that. They were saying I was like threatening. I'm not threatening anybody. They're the ones doing the threatening. They do phony investigations. I've been investigated more than Alphonse Capone. He was the greatest gangster. No, it's true. No, but think of it. It's called weaponization of government. It's a terrible thing.
So,
Brett, I'm sorry, and with all due respect, that clip was not what he has been saying about the enemy within that he has repeated when he's speaking about the American people. That's not what you just showed.
He was asked.
In a lot of ways it was, though. Like, he says that a lot. And the fact is that when he's talking about the enemy within, he's definitely talking about the erratical people and the people who are extreme as far as his political opponents. It's not like he's sitting there saying this about all Americans. And I don't think he's saying it about people who just disagree with him. I think he's talking about the people who are taking extreme measures to hurt or make a change or to get their ideologies to be forced upon people. I think that's definitely what he speaks about when he's speaking about the enemy.
No, that's not what you just showed. In all fairness and respect to you,
that was the question that we asked him.
You didn't show that, and here's the bottom line. He has repeated it many times, and you and I both know that. And you and I both know that he has talked about turning the American military on the American people. He has talked about going after people who are engaged in peaceful protest. He has talked about...
When has this other person said that he was going to turn the military on people who were protesting peacefully? I listen to both sides, and I've never heard him talk about he was going to send the militia to attack or turn them on people who just simply don't agree. Or see, stuff like that. She's formed her own opinion about the situation because she's uncomfortable or offended that the fact that he presented to her about the population and how many more of them agree that she's failing or her administration is failing them and it's not working out, that our country is not in a better place, however you want to look at it. She didn't like it. And so now what she has to do is try to blame and bash and overshadow and exploit the other person by overshadowing the conversation with their flaws, or try to play her narrative of maximizing or blowing out of proportion things that the other person said, so she can play on the feelings of the people who are watching her.
Locking people up because they disagree with him. This is a democracy. And in a democracy, the President of the United States, in the United States of America, should...
She's upset. You can see it in her body language. You can see it in the aggression of her movements. I forgot to turn my cell phone off again. But yeah, she's upset. She's sitting here right now acting out because her feelings are hurt by the fact that he told her the truth, and she's uncomfortable. So now it's time to and she, I don't know, she's kind of holding her self in professional fashion. However, you can still see her anger being displayed.
Should be willing to be able to handle criticism without saying he'd lock people up for doing it. And this is what is at stake, which is why you have someone like the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff saying what Mark Milley has said about Donald Trump being a threat to the United States of America.
He's quoted in the Bob Woodward.
Sorry about the sirens. When you live in the inner city, you kind of hear that a lot. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a chance to pass.
We're booked that way, yes. Let me ask you this, Madam Vice President. You call Donald Trump. You call Donald Trump. He's misguided. You say now
he's unstable.
She straight up said it. Yeah, he's unstable. I sure did. Look at how she fixed her face. Yep, yeah, I said he's unstable. Is that not name calling? Is that not demeaning to somebody? See, that's what I'm saying. The hypocrisy is all in the air. I mean, I'd rather deal with a person who's straight up than to deal with somebody who's being a hypocrite. And that's just my outlook on life in general.
Stable?
He is unstable, Brett.
He's not well. You say he's mentally not stable?
He's not stable.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you...
See, that's what I'm talking about. A person's credibility is very low for me when they get asked something that we all saw with our own, even the other people on, that are a part of the administration that they're on. These people have even finally confessed with their own mouths that they saw that there was something wrong in the condition or presentation or exhibition of Joe Biden. And the fact that the fact that these people try to condition or manipulate us to go against what we was all seeing in a reality is mind-boggling to me. And the credibility for you is very low for me because you definitely stood on that. You stood on the fact that it was nothing wrong. You stood on the fact that everything was okay and that he was on his best game and he was definitely fit for the bill and all these kind of things. This person was definitely declining before our eyes, and there was a lot of errors. And the administration that's in office right now tried to cover it up and basically deceive us in an attempt to deceive us right before our eyes. If you walked up on a pile of dog, you don't even have to smell it to know that it's dog doo. And I don't believe that a person in their right mind would stand there and allow somebody to try to tell them that's not dog doo-doo, that's ice cream. That's ice cream. But go ahead.
you first noticed that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making.
See, in order to save face, she still sit there and lie. She said that she done watched this man the whole time, even when we're not able to see the mistakes or to see the decline or to see the mental distress in a person. She sees it all the time, and she's still gonna see and try to say that he was okay and that he was normal. Wow.
Very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump.
So she's saying it's not fair for you to bring up Joe Biden because he's not on the ballot. Even if he's not on the ballot, we're not questioning his decline to try to say he shouldn't run. We're questioning his decline because we're trying to hold you accountable for backing him up and saying that he was okay when you clearly saw and we all could see on a regular basis that things were not okay. Is the fact. That is the point that he is making by bringing up Joe Biden. And how many times, even though Donald Trump is on the ballot, but how many times has she used Donald Trump's name as a defense mechanism or as a rebuttal to avert or not take accountability for the questions that she was being asked?
Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand.
She was so uncomfortable with him keeping her on focus of the fact that he was outing her and questioning her comprehension on what she was seeing when she was seeing Joe Biden in action. If you can make a mental judgment in your mind and say that that man at the top of his game, after what you were seeing, and it was even times where he was up there talking and she even kind of looked concerned at times, but she mostly tried to save face and pretend that nothing was happening. But wow.
You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump, which is why the people who know him best, including leaders of our national security community, have all spoken out. Even people who worked for him in the Oval Office, worked with him in the Situation Room, and have said he is unfit and dangerous and should never be president of the United States again.
So at some point they had to have said that about Joe Biden as well. Is that not why he all of a sudden stopped running when he was definitely fired up as he could be about trying to become president a second time? All of his words were definitely fired up and standing behind and supporting him all the way, even though they were trying to pretend that they didn't see his decline and things of that going on with his mental health.
Including his former vice president, which is why the job was open for him to choose another running mate. So that is a fact. That is a fact.
Madam Vice President, 2 more things. You were asked on 60 Minutes about the biggest threat that the world faces, that the U.S. faces. This is what you said.
Which foreign country do you consider to be our greatest adversary?
I think there's an obvious one in mind, which is Iran. Iran has American blood on their hands, okay? This attack on Israel, 200 ballistic missiles. What we need to do to ensure that Iran never achieves the ability to be a nuclear power, that is one of my highest priorities.
Okay. She answered the question very direct. She answered the question very thoroughly. So that went pretty well for her. You know, she was right on about how she felt, what the issue was, and thought that went pretty well for her. Let's see what happens next.
A number of experts thought you would say China. The FBI director had said that. But you said Iran. If that's the case, what do you say to critics who look at the actions of your administration and say you're not acting like Iran is the number one threat?
Well, I will tell you most recently, whether it was in April or in October, and then several hours on each occasion, that Iran posed a threat to Israel. I was there, most recently in the Situation Room, in the most recent attack, working with the heads of our military and doing what America must always do to defend and to support Israel in its requirement to defend itself and to give American support to be.
You see that? He looked over to the side and nodded. So that means that there's somebody behind the scenes standing there telling him, all right, man, it's time to start wrapping it up. It's time to start wrapping it up. And as a reporter, I'm pretty sure that it's his job to try to start gaining control of the conversation so it can go a little more speedy, especially when you're talking to an individual who can pad the runtime of their answer by over talking instead of being direct in what the premise of the question or conversation was about.
Be able to allow Israel to have the resources to defend itself against attack, including from Iran and Iran's terrorist proxies in the region.
Right.
And that
but those
is,
proxies
and,
were getting
and
funded
my
by
commitment
Iran.
to that is unyielding and unwavering.
Critics just say that you either relaxed or failed to enforce sanctions on Iran, allowing all of this money to flow into Iran, like billions
Let's
in
go back
oil
to Donald
profits.
Trump.
See, there we go. Let's go back to Donald Trump, because that was a question that I didn't like and it made me feel uncomfortable. So now it's time to shift the blame so that I don't have to be accountable for what you just asked me. Wow. I mean, people are seeing it. Don't y'all see this? Are we so caught up and conditioned to focus more on feelings and emotions over logic and facts? Did you just not see that? Did we not all see that? She came and said, no, let's talk about Donald Trump. I'm tired of talking about my flaws because I can't handle that. Let's talk about Donald Trump. That makes me feel better when I'm talking about somebody else's flaws. So that way, and see what I'm going through or me being the culprit or whatever it is that I'm doing that I'm trying to hide. I don't like you exposing me. So let's move on and let's talk about Donald Trump.
Who pulled out of a deal that would have actually put Iran in check.
The estimates in billions.
It was during Donald Trump's administration
that
Iran
regime
that we had an American military base that was attacked, where American soldiers suffered traumatic brain injuries, and Donald Trump dismissed them as headaches. Not to mention how Donald Trump has treated and talked about America's military and military service people, calling them suckers and losers.
He looked over to the side again. Somebody is back there. And I'm not saying that it's like, no, I'm not trying to say that it's a conspiracy thing or that, I'm basically just saying I noticed that he cut his eyes over to the side again. So there's definitely someone there. It could be the producers, it could be her handlers, it could be whoever, but I'm just saying it's definitely someone standing there that's trying to gain control of him to get control of her. Like, it could even be them back there saying, all right, time, come on. Or they could have been back there saying, hey, y'all talking over each other. I'm pretty sure there's some trained gesture that they can give in a situation where the host or the person that they're interviewing, which she wouldn't be able to see because her back is to them, that can help them, guide them through the interview process while they're on camera.
Hamas
has diminished
and Houthis.
the significance.
We're talking over each other. I apologize.
Well, I would like that we would have a conversation that is grounded in full assessment of the facts, which includes, I think this interview is supposed to be about the choices that your viewers should be presented about.
And it is. See, now she's trying to paint the illusion that she's been backed into a situation and trying to find flaw in him by saying, you're not even asking me questions that your viewers should be concerned with. Is that not what she basically was just saying?
This election, and the contrast is important.
Yes, ma'am.
And on the subject of Iran.
He looked up and nodded again. They're telling him time is up. It's almost up. You need to get as much as you can out of this before we are telling you we're done. It's done. The interview is done.
I am offering what should be an important contrast that is presented for folks.
Now, the way he's looking at her like, ma'am, at this point, I feel like you're full of crap. That's the look that this man got on his face.
Folks to make a decision
and there are critics
that they feel.
who look at what the administration did and say and think differently. Madam Vice President, they're wrapping me very hard here. I hope you got to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's right. I hope you got a chance to say what you wanted to say about Donald Trump, because you really haven't an answer, well, given many answers on the questions that I asked you directly. Mostly everything was leading back to, well, Donald Trump, well, this man. So you can keep on trying to manipulate and keep people that are conditioned to be angry at your opponent.
There are a lot of things.
There's more to say. I have much more to say.
There are a lot of things that people want to learn about you and your policies, and that's why
I invite everyone to go to KamalaHarris.com.
My boy put the paper down. And then he even had to kind of look. It looked like he kind of licked his teeth, because he was like, like he's like, all right. He said, I surrender. I won't be able to ask you any more questions, so let me just go ahead and close it down. Which I heard him say he had two, and he was only able to ask one. The way he was shuffling through the papers, it looked like it was actually more than two, but he was just going to go ahead and focus on two of the last of the questions that he had to ask, because he felt like those were more important.
And you will see that I have 80 pages of policies that are quite comprehensive and should be accessible to anyone who would like to read them. And it includes what I intend to do about affordable housing.
It's a little insulting for me to hear somebody that's currently in power tell me basically that I know these things are issues and I know I haven't been doing them, but if you vote for me, I will definitely start to get these things rolling. And the issues that you are proposing that you are aware of, those issues have been already going on. This isn't like this happened last week or this happened today and you're saying, well, you know what? This is out of my control right now. If you vote for me, I can definitely get up in there and get it cleaned up, because that's what it sounds like the opponent is saying on their platform.
Housing, what I intend to do about small businesses, what I do.
And that's why we invited you here,
our economy,
to see where you were in 2019 and where you are now.
America's military and ensure we have the most lethal and best fighting force in the world.
Madam Vice President,
and
they're giving me a hard rap
Well,
here.
I thank you for the time.
I thank you for the time.
Wow. Wasn't that something? She said, well, oh well, thank you for your time then. Thank you. I want to also add the reaction to his reaction to the interview.
Dana, I'll give you a little behind the scenes here. I know you love this, and it fits in with Dana Reed Sports. You know, when the kicker in football, they call a timeout right before he's going to kick the field goal. They're icing the kicker. So we were supposed to start at 5 p.m. This was the time they gave us. Originally, we were going to do 25 or 30 minutes. They came in and said, well, maybe 20. So it was already getting whittled down. And then the vice president showed up about 5:15.
See, he even said at the beginning they were supposed to do 25 or 30 minutes, and when they got there, they changed it to 20. She really didn't want to be interviewed by the opponent. At least the other person on the campaign trail, even if it has been 2-on-1, even if he was aware that he was going to be double teamed, even when it was aware that he knew he was going on his enemy's turf, not enemy, so people won't feed into that and say, oh, enemy. You know, people are just too oversensitive right now and demonstrating their lack of self-control, even in their comprehension of information that's being displayed to them in front of their face. But he definitely said that they even came in and shaved off some more time, which to me feels like I didn't do this anyway, so I don't want to do 25, 30 minutes. I'll do 20 at best.
Pushing the envelope to be able to turn it around for the top of the 6 o'clock. So that's how it started. And I could tell when we started talking that she was going to be tough to redirect without me trying to interrupt. I did this with President Obama. At one point I just said, Mr. President, I know you like the filibuster. I just didn't even have the chance to sometimes redirect in those ways. I had a lot of other questions.
See, and I think that's a fact. I think he authentically didn't have time to ask all his questions. I do think that she was speaking over him to try to deflect. I think she was prolonging her answers because she was aware herself of the time limit, and she knew how to, because she's educated, she knew how to round and overtalk to make sure that the conversation can only last. I mean, that the overall conversation could be limited to where she could get out of there without answering so many questions. Oh, that was my reaction to it. It's unfortunate that we can be misled and we can let feelings and emotions and things of that nature cloud our judgment and not be able to see the bigger picture, not be able to comprehend logic and fact. And if there's anybody out there who's actually voting, just like when Obama was running, it's a reality that it was people out there voting for him simply because he was black and they were black. In this situation, you may even have a multitude of people who feel like, I just want a woman president for the first time, or she's a woman of color and we want a woman of color or just another person of color to be in office. And those are all people's opinions. They can be realized and they can be respected. However, that doesn't mean that it makes it right. That doesn't make them correct if they're overlooking qualities, if they're overlooking truths, if they're overlooking facts, just to fit their overall narrative of, I like this person. This is somebody that I like, not because they're qualified, but because I like them. And we can definitely make that mistake anytime when we're trying to vote or to mediate or anything that we come across in life. Not all journalists are unbiased. However, I will agree that these people, if that's primarily a conservative show, then if I'm not a conservative and I go on that platform, I should already be aware and be able to handle being questioned differently, because they're going to see me differently than the people who are actually on my team regardless of whatever goes on. They're not going to see them differently. So when he goes onto her platform, all of those people that work for her are definitely going to have a bias in how they deliver their questions and how they place blame and how they person accountable. And also when it's vice versa. But I do believe that Big Orange Man Bad, I think that he, for the most part, himself the same. But overall, either side that you choose to vote for, always remember that no great leader comes without flaw, except for Jesus Christ. And that's just in my religion and the faith that I practice. But no great leader comes without flaw. And if you are in a situation where you have one person that is able, yeah, I have those flaws and I am overcoming them, that is more so logical than the person who sits up and wants to make excuses or hide behind things or try to manipulate a society or a group of people by hiding behind an issue or make excuses and things of that nature, so they don't necessarily have to hold accountability. Then what happens is this person starts to be looked at more of a perfectionist, because you can say, well, everything that you do that can be looked at as a flaw or as a mistake, you don't grow or have to be accountable for it because you have reasons or you have excuses for why, and not just saying, yes, it happened, so I can take hold of it and move forward. They definitely hold her opponent on a different standard, that anything he says will be nitpicked, it will be overanalyzed, so that anything that her opponent says is going to be maximized, is going to be blown out of proportion, is going to be play on feelings and emotions to condition people or to brainwash them into disliking him or hating him because that he doesn't agree or he's telling the truth. Those are things that we need to look at because that's what I see a lot in our politicians, and it's definitely perpetuated into our society. And a lot of the people in our American country are programmed to feel that way. They can definitely push out or destroy logic and facts to say that their personal feelings supersede what is logical, what is truth, what is just. It's all about feelings and emotions and not logic and facts in America. And as long as we are sitting around accepting this illegal behavior, we will forever be haunted continuously by this movement, and we will move further away from logic and facts to a place where it's a free-for-all with no type of rules or responsibility. Everybody can walk around and feel how they want to feel and dominate every conversation, every situation, and come out unscathed overall because they had a reason or an excuse or a feeling that made them feel more superior or more deserving than another person. And that, my friends, in my outlook, would be building someone up to be egotistical, or building someone up to be entitled, or building someone to be narcissistic toward others in their own misunderstanding of what justice is equally and what equal rights is on the playing field situation that arises in our lives. Thank you for checking out my first reaction video. I felt like I wanted to do something different. If you want to see more reaction videos like this, let me know in the comments. I had a lot of fun doing it, and this is just one of the things that you can see going forth in our development of the We Have the Power podcast. Again, it's about exercising my freedom of speech and having my freedom of thought. I hope that what can be looked at as my opinions, or that is my opinions, is people out there who agree. And you never know who a person can talk to. Like, you may be talking to your family member and you can be saying the exact same thing and they won't take it in because of their personal feelings about you, but they can hear somebody else say that very same thing and it'll resonate into them just because it wasn't you. Y'all have safe, wonderful, and prosperous travels. This was necessarily a ministry moment. This was more of a video reaction. So I'll just be able to sign off today on this one and say, always remember, you are uniquely, beautifully, and wonderfully made. Anything is possible. We can do all things. We have the power. Thanks, and y'all have a blessed night.